The US Navy strike group vessel, the Carl Vinson, moves towards the Korean peninsula in the Western Pacific. The vessel altered course, cancelling a planned trip to Australia, in what officials are describing as a show of force. The manoeuvre comes as China and South Korea agree to bring in tougher sanctions on North Korea if it carries out nuclear or long-range missile tests. The US and South Korea are preparing fully for possible provocations by the North, he says, considering the possibilities of Pyongyang's strategic provocations, including nuclear and missile tests, are increasing. China is North Korea's main diplomatic and economic ally. There were words of caution from the government in Beijing. We're paying close attention to the development of the situation. Under the current situation, we think all sides should exercise restraint and avoid aggravating tensions. Pyongyang marks several major anniversaries this month, occasions which, analysts say, are often marked with major tests of military hardware. A large number of foreign media correspondents have been invited to Pyongyang this week to cover events.
In a parallel imaginary 2017, this is a busy bridge. Instead, it's deserted. On the Chinese side, a customs building is idle. In North Korea, the bridge dissolves into fields. The bridge was built to be a sign of normality and North Korean openness, but those dreams burst. Today, the bridge is a symbol, but one of North Korea's isolation. And the river is nearly as empty as the bridge. Until recently, boats carrying coal were a common sight. But in February, in response to a North Korean missile test, China said it was suspending coal imports from its neighbour. On Sunday, swimmers were easier to spot. Some trucks are still crossing another bridge upstream, but the United States wants this trade to stop too. It thinks China should punish North Korea more for its continuing missile tests, even cutting all economic ties. But that could carry risks.
Instead of persuading North Korea to give up nuclear weapons, you may cause a collapse of North Korean government. That would create a chaotic situation as well as a huge humanitarian disaster.
In Dandong, people agree. Few here feel threatened by North Korea. Many have connections with their neighbour, which date from the Korean War.
It's impossible to completely shut down trade because our men shed their blood in that land. My father fought for that country.
I'm not worried about North Korea. China is so big and strong now. They're not a threat.
Last Friday, Donald Trump told Xi Jinping that without new ideas from China, the US was prepared to chart its own course. A sign of that came over the weekend as it sent warships towards the Korean peninsula. Whether North Korea over there sees US ship movements as provocative could become clear on Tuesday when its Supreme People's Assembly holds a rare meeting. A big parade set for next Saturday in Pyongyang could also be a moment for Kim Jong-un to react. China wants both sides to stop provoking the other. It's long urged strategic patience towards North Korea. But US patience is fast running out. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Dandong, on China's border with North Korea.
During the meeting in the Mar-a-Lago resort last week, President Xi Jinping and President Trump confirmed their commitment to denuclearize the Korean peninsula and to implement United Nations resolution on the Korean nuclear issue. The two leaders then agreed to discuss the issue on a regular basis. President Xi also calls for both the US and the DPRK to exercise restraint to maintain peace in the region. I want to stress that this is reasonable and impartial. China hopes the relevant parties will consider them thoroughly and respond accordingly. I would like to reaffirm that China always opposes the use of force in international relations. Given the current situation, we should prevent the further deterioration of the Syrian issue. We hope that all parties can uphold the hard-won process of political settlement in the situation. We demand that the related country takes responsibility as a UN Security Council member so as to protect international security.
This call for restraints after the U.S. announced that it is dispatching a Navy strike group to the Korean Peninsula amid tensions with North Korea.
We are paying close attention to the development of the situation on the peninsula. Under the current situation, we think all relevant sides should exercise restraint and avoid actions that could aggravate tension.
China's special envoy for the Korean Peninsula has held talks with his South Korean counterpart over the situation in the region. After the meeting, the South Korean envoy said the two sides agreed to adopt strong additional measures in case of fresh nuclear or intercontinental ballistic missile tests by the North. The U.S. has sent one of its aircraft carriers to the Korean Peninsula in a show of force against what Washington calls Pyongyang's reckless nuclear weapons program. Jason Unruhe is a political commentator and analyst joining us from Ontario. So basically, just to cut the fluff out since we have little time, do you think that the U.S. is on its way to attack North Korea, or by some accounts, many news outlets saying that the recommendations that he's getting is to assassinate the president, Kim Jong-un?
I would, if you had asked me this several days ago, I would have said that it's unlikely that they would attack, but then the unlikely against Syria took place, and that certainly brings into question the patience that the United States has with its policy towards the DPRK. As we've seen from the past, the whole policy of waiting things out to try to take down the country using other means, particularly sanctions and whatnot, to try to destabilize the government and take it down, haven't worked. But this new measure of wanting to, decapitate the leadership of the DPRK is something that they're hoping will work, because their previous policies have not been successful thus far, and a direct military invasion would almost certainly end with a nuclear war. The hope is that with the assassination of the leader, that the country would then proceed to fall apart, which they had failed to do previously with outright destabilization efforts. But as to whether or not the United States is actually going to strike the DPRK, it's unknown now, given the unstable manner in which they've been carrying out their foreign policy just recently.
Finally, quickly, if the path that the U.S. is taking is to strike the DPRK in one way or another, doesn't that mean then that really North Korea is out of the control of China's hands, that China has not been able to keep up their process of maintaining them?
Well, China certainly has some influence over the DPRK, but the DPRK has always been very adamant about their right to self-defense and their right to determine their own destiny, free from imperialism. China has wielded a very minimal amount of influence over the country in the several decades following the Korean War. The best China can do is try to incentivize the DPRK to act in a way that would be beneficial towards political stability in the region. But I don't place much in the way of hope of that happening, considering the DPRK has focused so much on their own right to self-determination, even going so far as using nuclear weapons to try to preserve that.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. That is Jason Unruhe, political commentator and analyst from Ontario.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson actually reported in an interview on Sunday that in his meeting with U.S. President Trump, Chinese President Xi Jinping expressed a bit of a change in stance on North Korea. He said that they were actually in agreement with Trump that action needed to be taken, and as Trump asked for, they do actually want to do more. At the same time, Reuters is reporting a Chinese envoy is in South Korea, or going to South Korea today, to discuss the issue. Regarding the strikes in Syria, a lot of Chinese analysts see them a little bit differently than the situation with North Korea. They point to North Korea's nuclear weapons and the possibility of a nuclear counterattack as a likely or a strong deterrent against any U.S. military action. However, these strikes, if nothing else, do show to Beijing that President Trump is willing to take action, especially given his unpredictable nature.